Let's start with Sri Lanka, where the parliament has begun choosing a new leader to serve the rest of the current term, which ends in 2024. This after the president fled abroad and resigned following mass protests over the country's economic collapse. Parliament's Speaker has promised a swift and transparent political process that should be completed within a week. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was sworn in on Friday as interim president until Parliament elects a successor to Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Us in the crisis-hit island nation, however, insist the six-time Prime Minister too should step aside. The new president could appoint a legislator to replace Wickremesinghe. The Parliament's Secretary General says nominations for the presidential post will be heard on Tuesday. If there is more than one candidate for the president, the legislators will vote on Wednesday. Rajapaksa fled to the Maldives and then to Singapore this week to escape a popular uprising against his government. During the proceedings, Dasan Nayake also formally read out Rajapaksa's resignation letter, the contents of which have not previously been made public. In his letter, Rajapaksa said Sri Lanka's financial crisis is rooted in years of economic mismanagement that predated his presidency, along with the COVID-19 pandemic that drastically reduced Sri Lanka's tourist arrivals and remittances from foreign workers. But protesters have accused Rajapaksa and his powerful political family of siphoning money from government coffers and of hastening the country's collapse by mismanaging the economy. The family has denied the corruption allegations. However, Rajapaksa has acknowledged some of his policies contributed to Sri Lanka's meltdown.
We speak now to Mabrur Ahmed, who is founder and director of Restless Beings, a UK-based human rights group, about the latest. Mabrur, good to talk to you again. So let's just first start with this. Sri Lanka receiving the first of 3 fuel shipments today. The energy minister announcing this. These are the first shipments to reach the country in about 3 weeks, we understand. How much of a dent will they make to the dire situation there?
I mean, the reality of it is that these are aid shipments. If anything, this is not to kind of rebalance and redress the economy. Under Gotabaya Rajapaksa's leadership, his presidency, the country's debt fell from about the country's kind of credit fell from about $7.5 billion down to $1 million. So, I mean, the mismanagement that he refers to in his that was read out to Parliament today largely is down to his mismanagement. It's his economic mishaps, and of course there was a pandemic to contend with. But at the end of the day, without question, you know, the economy has suffered under his rule.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that, his role and what he's admitted to and alluded to in his resignation letter. But I want to look at the state of the economy. When we last spoke, we spoke about the large fuel and food shortages. But the economy itself, I believe it's likely to contract by more than 6% this year alone. Also partly because of the political instability and social unrest. Talk me through it. You know, it's in talks for financial relief with the IMF, but how long-term or medium-term is that?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, when you're talking about an economy contracting, generally, you know, obviously we're talking about recessions, but in a time like this where we're talking about a state of emergency, we're talking about this country, Sri Lanka, has literally got no credit to be able to buy stuff. It's relying on aid for even things like fuel. What you're likely to see is enterprises which are aligned with state. So things like the airline, you know, Sri Lanka Airlines, you're talking about things like that could potentially become absorbed by the state in order to try and offset some costs. I know that was a big discussion that was happening earlier this week as well. We're talking about things like the military coming in to prop up large parts of the administration of the country, as we've already seen because of a state of emergency. These are the sorts of things that happen when the economy is in such a state, in such a condition. There's not that much precedence, of course, when you're talking about modern states and modern economies. You never really talk about economies that are in this position where they literally have zero credit and they are going to contract as well this year. So it's two things happening at the same time. I mean, economies contract all the time. That's a recession that happens across the globe, but not at a time when the country is in a state of emergency and also that there is zero credit. So we're talking about an unprecedented economic situation, an unprecedented economic condition. And so therefore, as a result, unprecedented kind of woe that potentially, faces forward for the people of Sri Lanka.
India has said that it's handed over something like 80 million SLR in dry rations. And I'm wondering how many other countries are looking to come to its aid. What is the day-to-day like for the ordinary Sri Lankan? Because, while a lot of people are celebrating this victory, but people can't eat hopes and dreams.
Absolutely. And I think, what you just mentioned absolutely hits the nail on the head. We're looking at an aid situation. And Sri Lanka, it shouldn't be in an aid situation. It's a relatively successful economy. The people are relatively, kind of well off in terms of GDP. So this is unusual. This is not something that the Sri Lankan people are ready for in terms of kind of receiving rather than just being part of the regional economy. So now, as a result, you've seen India. You're more than likely going to see other countries coming forward and potentially, having bits of aid that they might push forward. And like I said, first of all, we've got to remember Sri Lanka is an island country, so it's reliant on importing things from other places. Where the credit for importing is not there, then many things that people take for granted in their day-to-day life will now suddenly disappear. And of course, put on top of that the fact that there is no fuel. We're talking about many schools being closed down. People are not able to have a livelihood. We're talking about the political infrastructure of the country completely at breaking point. This is a very, very strenuous time for the people of Sri Lanka. And to be honest with you, for the past almost 20 years, the vast majority of Sri Lanka, majoritarian politics has taken place by the Rajapaksa brothers, where they have used things like nationalism, fending off, the Sinhalese against the Tamil, against the largely Muslim population of parts of Sri Lanka as well. And that has been used to cover up the financial mismanagement, which has happened for the best part of a generation under the watch of this dynasty of family. So, the nationalism that had been used as this point of reconciliation almost no longer holds any credence, because the economy is falling to pieces. The people have fallen out of love with the Rajapaksa brothers, and now something needs to give, and it looks like that the thing that's going to give is the resolve of the Sri Lankan people.
So I want to talk about that, Mabrur. So Rajapaksa goes from what some have said Sinhala champion to fugitive leader, spectacular coward, as some have accused him of. And as we mentioned in the resignation letter, he admits to some of the things, but he also said that he did all that was possible to avert the Sri Lankan crisis. He pointed out that within 3 months of his presidency, the whole world came to be hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. We've spoken about that, how much he should own of the current situations, including the acting president, who is the prime minister, who's also vying for the presidency. Is any real change in the offing?
There's absolutely zero change that's happening with Wickremesinghe. Let's be absolutely clear about that. This is a guy who's been prime minister on 6 occasions and never once completed his term. He's also the right-hand man of Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He's his chosen commander-in-chief in his absence. He has a one-member party in parliament, with him being the only member that is now being backed by the ruling party, the Rajapaksa brothers party. So it's a hegemony. It's a complete kind of monopoly on the politics by the Rajapaksas, and now vis-a-vis Wickremesinghe. That is not going to change anything for the people of Sri Lanka. Let's not forget, just this time last week, not only was the presidential palace attacked, but so was the prime ministerial abode as well. And like I said, because he only has a one-person or a one-seat party, Wickremesinghe, he actually holds no people's mandate either. And so sooner or later, I mean, it's most likely that he probably will be chosen in the week ahead by the parliament as the president, because the ruling party, Rajapaksa's party, will throw their weight behind Wickremesinghe. So I would be amazed. I would be completely amazed if Wickremesinghe does not become president within the next 7 days. But if he does, as I say, he absolutely holds no people's mandate. Now, the only way that the Sri Lankan people might accept Wickremesinghe is if we see a real shift away from the policies that Rajapaksa employed before. But we're talking about, the people are going to want to see an immediate difference to the economy. They're going to want to see an immediate kind of restocking of fuel centers. And if not that, they're going to want to see progress. We're talking about someone who in the last few days has kind of announced a state of emergency. The people have defied his state of emergency. They've been back out on the streets. They've been protesting. In response to the protests, Wickremesinghe has called them fascists. So we're talking about an out-of-touch leadership.
So you're saying people are looking for tangible change. Thanks a lot for that. Mabrur Ahmed, thanks for speaking to us. He is the founder and director of Restless Beings. It's a UK-based human rights organization.